What's up? Welcome back, or welcome for the first time. Misfiring. I'm in the middle of diagnosing a misfire. Check engine light came on, was not flashing. Just so you know, a solid check engine light means there's an emissions failure. A failure that is causing excessive emissions out of the tailpipe. That is the reason of the check engine light. If it's flashing at you, it means that it's misfiring and it's causing possible damage to the catalyst or catalytic converter, or Cadillac converter, whichever you like to say, Cadillac convertible. So flashing, not good. Pull over, shut it off. Don't cause no more damage. Solid, if it runs okay and seems to drive okay, it's your choice from there. I don't want to tell you it's okay to drive because every scenario is going to be different. But what I'm tracking is a misfire. The fault code was P0300, which means there's a misfire and the engine cannot determine which cylinder it is because there's either multiple cylinders misfiring or the misfire isn't what we call dedicated, meaning it's broke. It's a slight misfire, so it still can't determine, even though it knows, it won't tell you. So I hooked up my scanner and I was reading the live data that shows the misfire counter. And for cylinder number four kept popping off and setting a code, or not a code, but it kept setting, the numbers kept rising. Every other cylinder showed 0. So what I did was located cylinder number 2 on the Chevy Tahoe. I removed the coil and I removed the wire from cylinder number 2. I marked the coil so I know which one I took it from. I marked the wire so I know which one I took this from. And I'm going to take the spark plug out and I'll mark on the valve cover where I put the spark plug. I'm going to move the coil to another cylinder. I'm going to move the wire to another coil. And I'm going to move the spark plug to another cylinder. So what I did was I just took out the coil out of the equation, the spark plug out of the equation, and the wire out of the equation. So now if cylinder number 2 misfires again, it's either the injector or it's something to do with the compression. Clear as day. There's a mechanical malfunction or there's an injector malfunction. If the misfire moves to wherever I put the other part, whether it be where the coil's at or the wire's at or the spark plug, you guessed it, that's the failure. With this car being a 2000 and, we find you where you're at. Notice the fender covers as well. It's a 2010. Car is now 12 years old. The odds of it being a coil or wire or spark plug, it's great because, I'm sorry, it's great, not great in a good way. This is, the odds are in the favor of the failed components because the car is 12 years old and things can break down and fail. So these also show AC Delco, which are very possible that they're original if they've never been replaced by an AC Delco part. They all look the same. Nothing looks shiny or brand new or even aftermarket. So what I'm going to do is diagnose it. I'm not just going to put spark plugs in it unless I pull the plug. I haven't pulled the plug out yet. I'm about to do that. So I'll do that and recap it. We're going to find the misfire. All right. And what somebody might do if they don't have a scanner, you might drive to like a parts store and they might read the code and say you got misfires. Then their diagnosis sheet prints out coils, wires, spark plugs could be the issue. And you decide, I'll put this in it. I don't like that. I'm going to teach you guys, like I said, I'm going to teach you how to diagnose this stuff because it may take a little bit longer. You may have been right in your guess. I don't care. I don't want you to guess. I want you to know because all that's going to do is help you onto the next issue that you have. Or if somebody calls you, you don't want to say, try this. Don't try anything. Figure out what's wrong with it. It's not that hard. You just have to know how it's supposed to work. So I'm going to pull that plug out and we'll take a look at it and we'll go from there. Thinking about what I just told you, and I didn't watch it yet, but I might have changed up from cylinder number 4 to cylinder number 2. I may or may not have said that. So if I did, I'm a bonehead. Sorry about that. I need to trim my beard. But the issue is with cylinder number 4. So I'm going to move the coil, the plug, and the wire to different cylinders. Just want to be on the same page because my brain tells me I might have switched it over to cylinder number 2 and said that. If I did, ignore it. If I didn't, ignore this right now. Got the spark plug out. I don't know if this is gonna focus. It doesn't look, get my fat head out of the way. It doesn't look that bad. I don't see no oil on there. I don't see any excessive wear. It looks like somebody may have replaced these because there's anti-seize on the threads. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of lube to help it go into the hole without damaging the threads. It's another thing to coat it excessively because it can get onto the plug. It can cause issues. One thing you want to watch out for with spark plugs is this is nice and the ceramic looks good. If you see a bunch of brown around the ceramic, it means that the compression is leaking through the metal portion and coming out of where the ceramic is sealed with the metal. I don't know, whatever. But that's what that brown ring means. It's not rust, it's compression leaking through. What I've had before is when you take a spark plug out and you look at it, you're like, oh, it looks great. But if you turn it upside down, the ceramic actually broke free from the electrode and it covers the electrode, thereby not letting the spark ignite the fuel. I've had that. I had a car that came into the shop with a misfire and another dealer just did cylinder heads and it still misfired on the same cylinder. The customer was not happy after paying all that money, so they brought it to us to diagnose. I pull out the plug, did a compression check. It had compression. I'm like, well, they just did a cylinder head. And I'm looking at the spark plug. I'm like, it looks good, but it looked old. And I'm like, you just had cylinder heads off. Why wouldn't you put new spark plugs in it? And I was talking to somebody while I was doing it, and I moved it, and it clicked. It made a noise, so I turned it upside down, and the casing, or the ceramic, covered the electrode. I'm like, oh my God, this shop did cylinder heads for a spark plug on the customer's dime. Man, that is why diagnosis is so important, because we do have cylinder head issues in Mercedes, but just because you have something that's common doesn't mean it's your issue all the time. So this plug looks good. I'm actually gonna clean it up because there's a little bit too much anti-seize and gel on this thing. And I'll move this to another cylinder as well, and then I'll start it back up and see where the misfire goes. All right, so I got the stuff swapped. I'll show you where I put it. All right, so here's cylinder number 4. Chevy has it laid out 2, 4, 6, 8. So I have nothing original in this cylinder, all right? So what I did was, because it's easy, I put the wire over here in cylinder number 1. I put the plug over here in cylinder number 3, and I put the coil over here in cylinder number 5, and I got it marked. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to read the original codes just to make sure we start off fresh. It's not a huge deal, because if you read the live data, then you can determine the issue from there. But this is what I would normally do anyway. So we're going to erase the codes. Let's delete it all. Okay. I'll make sure there's no codes there. Come on, this is real time, so you know how long this kind of stuff takes. So when a shop's charging diagnosis, it's because we're sitting here waiting for the scanner to do something. All right, no fault codes. All right, so then I'm going to go to live data, and we're going to go to, where are you at? Misfire. And here's where it shows the numbers of the misfires as it's happening. All right, and then the history. So let's start it up and hope for the best. So this is one of those scenarios where I could hear it misfiring right now. I could hear it laboring. Sometimes it doesn't register a misfire until it reaches operating temperature and or until it's in closed loop mode. If you don't know what open loop or closed loop is, I will try to touch on that in another video, but it's something that I don't really have to deal with a lot, so it's hard for me to remember. I'd have to do some homework, but open loop is when you start the car and it's cold, it runs on a base value until it warms up the temperature, and then the cats are warmed up and the O2s are warmed up, and then from there it goes to closed loop and it runs off of the sensor data. If I'm wrong, put it in the comments, because I don't remember everything correctly and I don't know everything. So feel free to call me out on stuff. I encourage you to, as long as it helps somebody. So I'm gonna go ahead and back and we'll see if it's misfire now. There it is. Took an hour of running and 20 minutes of driving. Cylinder number 3. This is terrible. There we go. Cylinder 3. Do you guys remember what I put in cylinder 3? Were you watching? Were you paying attention? Let's open the hood and see what's up. All right, so I put the wire in 1, I put the plug in 3, and I put the coil in 7. The issue is a spark plug. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna replace all the spark plugs. You don't wanna do just one plug. You wanna assume that they're all in there the same amount of time. So if you do one, the others are gonna fail shortly after that. You couldn't see any physical differences with the spark plug. It's something happening with it that's causing it to short or not fire correctly. The tricky part too is misfires can occur only when cold and then get better as it warms up. They can occur only when hot and be perfect when it's cold. It can only occur under load, meaning torque of the engine trying to push something or pull something with like what we call load is like, imagine driving downhill, there's no load, you're free falling, right? But if you're driving up a great grade or a nice climb, you're under tremendous amounts of load, which is when ignition can break down. Ignition meaning coil, wire, spark plug. Things that I forgot to mention in a misfire. Let's say I move the coil, I move the wire, I move the spark plug. It still misfires in that cylinder. I mentioned that it could be the injector or it can be something mechanical with the cylinder, something to do with compression. What I didn't mention is you still have to verify that the injector wiring is good and it's flashing or getting power. You have to verify that the wiring at the coil is good. So you could just have a bad pin, a broken wire, something with the wiring harness going to those items. I don't want to forget that, okay? The worst part about this one is that it was what I would call intermittent or environmental, right? So it did have to warm up. It did have to run outside for about an hour. I did have to drive it, and then randomly at a stoplight, it started misfiring. So I wish I knew more as to why something would do that, especially the spark plug that's firing all the time. But sometimes it also doesn't matter because we know the issue. Now we just got to fix the issue. So what I did was I diagnosed the issue. Now let's say that you went to a parts store or something and you said, hey, I got a check engine light. They ran the codes and it says misfire. And you're like, oh, you know what? Could be spark plugs. I'll do spark plugs. You do the spark plugs and you fixed it. Nothing wrong with that. But then it's the time that it's not spark plugs, and now you spent the money on spark plugs that may have not been needed, or maybe you bought spark plugs and you didn't know that while they were bringing them to you, they dropped one and they put it back in the box. And you don't know because you can't see the crack in the porcelain. You put it in, now you have a misfire in the same cylinder or another cylinder. So now you're like, I just did spark plugs and I got more problems. Well, go back to the work you just did. That's why it's important to diagnose the issue. I love that D word, diagnose. Don't guess, diagnose. Does it take time? Yeah, it took time. It probably took 2 hours total. you know, plus the video recording and whatnot. But if you're in a shop, you're under a crunch, you're in a pinch, or maybe it's your work car and you got to fix it before the night before, I understand that there's many scenarios that can take into account. So you may just want to force a guess on something, but man, it just creates more problems down the road or even at that moment, because new parts do not mean they're good parts. Odds are I can get a set of spark plugs from the parts store, put them in, and have one messed up. That's the risk you take. I can do them from the dealer and still have one that's messed up. You never know what happens in transport. Things happen. So what I'm going to do is when I put spark plugs in, I'm not just going to close the hood, erase the codes, and give it away. I'm going to drive it again for another hour. Luckily, it's my neighbor, so they'll just walk it next door if there's an issue. But the case in point is if it's a customer, customers, or even the do-it-yourselfer, you have to take time out of your day to do this kind of stuff. Like if they got to bring it to a shop, they got to call off work, find the time to get there, maybe get a ride back, right? It takes time to do this stuff. So it's extra important as a technician that when I'm done fixing it, I verify the repair. Now there's a finite amount of time. I'm not going to drive it for 7 days straight, hoping it never happens again. It took me about an hour to get it to run and run bad with a little bit of a drive. So what I'll do is I'll put plugs in it. I'll start it up. I'll let it sit outside for about an hour again. I'll recheck it. I'll take it for one drive, the same route that I did. And if it doesn't misfire, I'm going to tell her, hey, listen, here's what happened. Here's what I found at this moment. It's fine. Anything's wrong, just let me know and I'll take another look at it, because it could happen a week from now, a month from now. You never know, right? So one thing I try not to tell people is you'll never have an issue again, because it's a lie. Cars fail, parts fail, right? All you can say is at this moment, I've done everything I could to try to replicate it. It's not happening. Let me know if it happens again and I'll take a look at it from there. So coils, spark plug wires, spark plugs, mechanical malfunction, meaning rings of the piston, a scored cylinder, valve stem seals leaking and causing oil onto the spark plugs, the bore being out of round, so there's no compression, the camshaft lobe could be worn, the camshaft lifter can be worn, the valve spring could have broken. There's many things that can cause a misfire in a cylinder. So just doing the proper processes will show you. Now, I didn't have to go into compression testing and all that kind of stuff with this one. I kind of feel like I should at least show you. Okay, so this is a compression tester. Almost all cylinders will register between 120 to 140 PSI, right? Now what that is when the piston moves down, a valve opens, it sucks air into the cylinder, the valve closes, the piston pushes up, creates pressure and compression. The fuel is already in the cylinder. If it's not direct injected, if it's direct injected, it's sprayed into the cylinder. The spark plug fires, which creates the piston to move downward, right? So what you're checking is there enough pressure in the cylinder? It's like if I did something as silly as this, that's good pressure. If I did this, not good pressure, right? So same thing with a cylinder. All an engine is a big air pump. Sucks air in, compresses the air, blows up the air. That's all it really does. So what we do is we screw this end into the spark plug hole, connect it into here, okay? As we crank it, I crank it till I get 6 good puffs. So it'll go, okay? And when I'm done, I write it down and I do all cylinders, however many cylinders you got. And you wanna make sure that the highest number is no more than 20% from the lowest number, okay? That indicates good compression. However, if you have all cylinders at 60 PSI, the engine's toast. Nothing has compression. It's typically about 120 PSI plus, all right? At that point, we would do what's called a cylinder leak down, where we would use a hose like this and another gauge, and we hook up shop air into the cylinder. And by shop air, I mean air compressor. We hook it up to here, and it forces air into the cylinder. And we make sure that it's at what we call top dead center, where the piston is all the way up and both valves are closed. The way we would know that is if we cranked it by hand with this hooked up, and we would see the pressure rise. Or you can put something into the cylinder, like a long rod or something, like a dowel rod or something. And when it stops moving up, you know that you reach top dead center. And we listen for the air leak. If it leaks through the intake, you have a bad intake valve or a seal on the cylinder head. If it leaks through the exhaust, you have a bad exhaust valve or a seal on the exhaust valve seat. or a broken valve spring and the valve's hanging down, something like that. If it comes through the oil fill tube or the oil cap, it's leaking past the rings. So that's how you determine where the compression loss is coming from. And then even then, you still got to figure out why it's doing that. So it can get pretty in-depth for something as simple as a misfire. But I'm going to go ahead and order spark plugs. I'm going to put them in. I'm not going to do wires. I'm not going to do coils. I don't care how old they are. They're not broken right now, so I'm not going to fix them. Is there anything wrong with doing that? You know my answer is always going to be yes and no. No, because there's nothing wrong with putting something new in your car. Yes, because you could put something bad in your car and now you just created another problem, all right? So, hope this video helps. Please subscribe. Please hit the notification. Send me a shout out on the comments if you got something you want to say, good or bad. I try to promote positivity and love, right? I want to help you guys and gals, whoever's watching. I hope you learn something from my videos. I'll say it before and I'm going to continue to say it. Watch all of my videos, because whatever you see in the title is not the only thing I'm going to talk about, because there's probably something in there that's going to help you in your car, some way, shape, or form. What I used as my scanner was my Autel into the Misfire live data screen. You can use a majority of scanners that will do the same, but it has to have that function to read the live data. What I could have done different if I had just a basic handheld one that only showed codes is I would erase the codes, move the cylinder, move the stuff that I did, no different, and just drive it until the light came on again, and then recheck the code and see what the code said. From there, you can do the exact same thing. You don't have to have a fancy scanner that shows live data. It's helpful, not 100% necessary. Yeah, I quit saying That's the thing I do with comedy. You can't say on stage. People want to hear you talking and make them laugh. But I don't think I have anything else for you, except if you're going to do spark plugs, put the OEM spark plugs in it. Don't get fancy. Don't get cheap. Don't get expensive. Get what's designed for the car or truck or the engine. Call the parts department at the dealership or look at the OEM brand. Sometimes your owner's manual should show the spark plug number. Use that one. That's designed for the car. If you have a GM, a Motorcraft plug is not going to work for you. An NGK may not work for you. A Nippendenso may not work for you. A Bosch may not work for you. It depends on what came out of there. If you have a German car and you pull out a double platinum Bosch spark plug or an NGK, something with iridium, a AC Delco plug is not going to work for you. A Motorcraft plug is not going to work for you. An Autolite, it's weird that numbers would cross and the parts department will give you a list of all the plugs that will work, but they're not going to work. And again, I wish I knew exactly why. There's something with tolerances and the way they're made that they're just not going to run the same. But anyone who owns a Chrysler or worked on Chryslers know that Autolite tends to work better for them. Anyone that owns a GM knows that AC Delco tends to work better for them. Anything German, Bosch, Nippendenso, NGK. Anything Asian, NGK, Nippendenso. Anything Ford, Motorcraft, right? So there are things that you don't learn until you've done it for years and years and years and realize what the problems are. So stick to the OEM stuff as much as you can. And sometimes even if you call the dealership, $1 more spark plug is worth it compared to a parts store one. There is a difference between what the dealership sells and what the parts stores sell. I learned this in training a long time ago. There's different steps to the manufacturing or automotive process to where the highest of caliber of parts coming off the line go to the dealers and manufacturers. The ones that don't meet the same specs or whatever, they get distributed down, and that's how you get cheaper sites like Rock Auto and stuff. You're kind of getting what you pay for. All right, I don't want to be mean. We'll say it like that. You will not catch me shopping at Rock Auto. No offense. Do what you want to do. You may have had great luck. That's great. I may not. Nor have I, right? But I've experienced people that have, and I've helped people that have, and I've worked on stuff that parts came from there. So it's my experience. Billions of people out there doing the same thing that I do. It's their own experience. You all have your own experience. What happens in Illinois may not happen in California, may not happen in Florida, may not happen in Washington. It's weird. There's geographical failures with cars. I promise you that. Any technician that's moved around the USA can say the same thing. Even from Chicago to down in Peoria where I'm at, we did not have the same failures down here. It's not crazy, but it's just something you learn with experience. So thanks again. I appreciate all you guys. I hope this is helpful. Gotta stop saying I gotta stop saying So check out my other videos I'll have down here. Please subscribe. You guys take care.